Good morning, everybody. Welcome to St. Mary's again. It's good to see you both with and without masks. It's interesting to see faces actually without masks for the first time in many months. But as Evan has said, do feel free to wear or not wear, whatever you feel comfortable with. I want to begin this morning by asking, what is your family like? What is your natural family like? What are the dynamics of your family? The habits, the rituals, the rivalries maybe that you were brought up with? Can anybody think of positive or negative things about their families? You don't have to share them with me now, but I'm sure you can. Raise your hand if you can think of lots of strange, maybe idiosyncrasies, odd things about your families where you come from. Put up your hand if you can. Yeah, I think most people would agree that most of us have got families with odd little habits, odd little rituals, odd little rivalries perhaps. Sibling rivalry, of course, being one of the most common ones. Certainly in our family, we've got a number of rituals that we go through according to different events that happen during the year. For instance, on a birthday, we have something called the congratulations plate. So when you're having dinner, you can have the special plate that was, I think, made by one of the children. It was in a pottery class, and it's got the words congratulations around it. So the congratulations plate is a good thing to have. It's a special moment. There's nothing really amazing about it, but it's just great to know that there's a reason why you're going to have the congratulations plate. Another thing that we used to have, I remember years ago, and it's not so common now, was cafe dinner. I'm sure our kids will remember that. It was a special occasion sometimes when we just had, a few candles or some nice lights in the room, and we just called it cafe dinner. It was like you're going to the cafe, you're going out for dinner. Birthday breakfast, perhaps. You have a special breakfast when it's birthday, and that sometimes, the older you get, the more difficult it becomes. You have to get up, people going out to work, you get up at about 5 in the morning, and then next time it's maybe it's not as early as 3:30, but you get up so early because you want to have some breakfast before and open the presents before the day goes on somebody's birthday. And I can think of a number of other things. It might be about how you open your presents. I remember in our family the differences between my family and Sarah's family. My family, it was like a free-for-all at Christmas. Everybody dives in and starts opening their presents. In Sarah's family, it was more of a tradition to watch the person as they open their presents and enjoy that moment. And it didn't cause a major marriage problems, but it certainly was something that was different in the early sort of first year of our marriage. Then there might be some more negative things that perhaps are associated with being in families, and it might be to do with conflict. Maybe there's a lot of conflict for one reason or another. And that, if it continues, can be quite a negative thing, or perhaps people aren't speaking to each other, things like that. All those negative things that also can come up and can go on for years sometimes. And some things are good and right to carry on from generation to generation. Other things may need to change. And either way, the life that Jesus calls us to, he invites us into a life that is different. Even no matter how amazing your family life might be, it's a different life from the life that you grew up in. Because every life that's given to Jesus, it's a new life. And every family that's then given to Jesus is a new family in many respects. And that was something that perhaps the mother of James, who we've heard about in our reading this morning, she didn't fully understand that, as she asks a question in Matthew 20, verses 20 to 21. And she asks this, it says that then the mother of Zebedee's sons, that is James and John, two of Jesus' disciples, came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. "What is it you want?" he asked. She said, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right, and the other at your left in your kingdom. One on the right, one on the left of Jesus. That's the question she was asking. And in the preceding verses, of course, it looks from what the verses before that actually say, it looks like Jesus, she's actually saying this on the back of Jesus actually predicting his own death. It seems quite inappropriate, really, to be just asking that kind of question. Jesus, and it seems from the passage that actually they were present when she asked, when he said what was going to happen to him in terms of his death, his crucifixion, his suffering for the world and for them. And so it was quite inappropriate, quite insensitive in many ways for her to say such a thing. It actually reminds me of people that sometimes can be guilty of being insensitive at times. People who are so focused sometimes on their own agendas, and we all know who these people are. We ourselves are guilty of that, of course, in conversation, aren't we, at times, who are so focused on our own agenda that we don't hear what's being said. I remember someone who I used to know quite well, and he was, he's a great guy, but we used to be, I remember, we'd be out somewhere and you'd be talking about maybe some quite deep things, and it would be a bit like this. If you said to him, my grandmother took seriously ill last week, and then he'd be going, right, yeah, like that, and then you say, she had a massive heart attack and she died, and then he'd be going, oh, that's great. I mean, and he'd be sort of saying, it's because he was kind of thinking probably about the next thing he was going to say, and sometimes he used to do that, maybe with not things quite so serious as that, but it's a bit like that kind of contrast. Somebody who is actually not really hearing what you're saying, and they're actually thinking so much about what they want to say that they're actually missing maybe something really important. And this woman, of course, was a bit like that. She hadn't really heard what Jesus had said, the full gravity of what he just said. And then she's actually saying, can one of my sons sit at your right hand and one at your left? I heard it once said that wisdom is the right application of the right information. And I think that could be a situation where the information was applied wrongly, what she was actually hearing to what she actually ended up saying. And Jesus then replied to James and John's mother, and he said in verse 22, you don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup I am going to drink? And they answered, we can. Now, they obviously were feeling like we can do what you're going to do. Again, maybe not appreciating the gravity of what was going to happen. And Jesus goes on to say, of course, in verse 23, he goes on to say, you will drink of that cup. And James, of course, he was, I believe, the first martyr, Christian martyr, and he was an early martyr for Christ. I know Stephen also was an early martyr of Christ, who died for Christ. And John goes on to be exiled to the island of Patmos and writes the book of Revelation. In many ways, both of them did drink the cup that he drank. They do drink that cup. But he knew that they weren't quite there yet. And of course, could you blame them in a way? I mean, they're actually in the moment. They're there with Jesus. How many of us would actually have realized the full immensity of what was going to happen, even if we were with him? Because it hadn't happened yet. And we all know, of course, what happened after his crucifixion and death. There's still a great amount of disbelief and unbelief amongst the disciples even about what's happened, until, of course, Jesus appears again, risen from the dead. But their poor mother, like any mother, just wanted the best for her kids. And of course, we can all be a bit presumptuous as well, can't we, in the questions that we ask. And maybe the question we need to be asking is, we need to ask before we actually ask the question, why are we asking? What are we asking for? When we ask Jesus and when we speak to other people, perhaps we need to be a little bit more thoughtful before we speak. And of course, her kind of misplaced question regarding her sons, James and John, in a way she was laying out a different kind of life, really, because it was her aspirations for her son, in a way, like any mother wanted the best for her sons, and she wanted them to be with Jesus. So it was quite a natural thing to ask, but it was misplaced. And Jesus then goes on to tell them that, of course, it's God who actually shows the way. And in verse 23, he says, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." And so Jesus explains that God guides, and it's actually God who will choose who is going to be with Jesus, and not our own choice in that respect. And then as it goes on in the passage in 24 and 25, we read, "When the 10 heard about this," that is the rest of the disciples, "they were indignant with the two brothers. Jesus called them together and said, 'You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant.'" And that really is getting to the point of what Jesus is really saying, is he's talking here about what it means to be great. He's pointing to the human authorities from whom the disciples and people are taking, in a sense, their guidance about what it means to live and relate to other people. And their understanding of what it means to be great is very human, before he explains the meaning of true greatness, which I've just read to you from verse 26. "Not so with you." And he's saying you are different because you are my people. And he says instead, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." And we can be the same. We can often be informed by our inherited or received family dynamics or habits or whatever it might be, what we've received from our family. And of course, as I said a moment ago, there's lots of good things we receive from our human families, but often we can also be informed by some of the bad things as well, those bad things that become a bit embedded in our hearts and in our lives. Or we can be guided by that, or we can be guided by our new family values. When we become Christians, we become part of a new family. We are a new creation, as Paul says. "I am a new creation, no more in condemnation." And when I became a Christian, I was really struck by the radical nature of the family that I was joining. And it wasn't that I'd left my old family. Of course I hadn't. Christianity isn't a cult, but it's a family. And so I was started to get to know people who were Christians, and I saw them living in a different way, and it really struck me how they lived their lives. It was really radical, and in the way that they related to each other. And of course we're all human, but there was some absence of that kind of sarcasm and kind of nastiness that you get in human relationships. And I thought, these people are living in a different way. And I was becoming part of that family. And as we become part of the family, then and as Jesus says, we start to realize what it means, what true greatness actually means. Because Jesus goes on then to explain it. And I want to just ask 3 questions. And the first question is, will we pursue true greatness? Will we pursue true greatness? Now on the screen you can see there's a picture there, and actually that's an old picture. I think it was of when we had a summer club here at St Mary's many years ago, and there was a lady in our church called Phyllis, and I think at that time, I think it was her 80th birthday. And there's a few people there. There's one or two people actually in the picture who you might recognize in the back, at the background. But Phyllis, it was her 80th birthday, and she was a great servant. She knew what true greatness was about. She was a nursery school teacher. She never married, but she gave her life to caring for children, and she was much loved by the children of this church, some of whom are still here today. They're adults now. One of them's getting married next week, actually, in the church, who loved Phyllis very much. And she was an example of someone who knew what greatness was really about. And the question for us is, will we pursue true greatness? Not like John and James and John's mum, for her own or for their own status, sort of climbing some kind of ladder so that others will serve us, but rather, as someone said once, stepping out of the kingdom of self into God's kingdom of service. Because to be a servant is to be truly great. It begins with us. As someone once said, I can't change the world, but I can change the world in me, and it's got to begin with us. And that brings me to the second question, which is, will we take the time? Now, the other evening we went for a walk. We had a nature walk, and it was a wonderful evening. There must have been about 20-25 people on this walk in a place that I'd never been there before. I'd been in Russia Dock. I got lost in it once, running through it on a couple of occasions when I was out for a run. But the other evening we went on this walk, and it was led by Gehan, who's Nirma, our treasurer's husband. And he's a great authority on the natural world and on birds especially. And what really struck me was that they took the time, and also we took the time. Many people took the time just to be together and go on that walk. It can be hard work sometimes, taking the time. It requires sacrifice on our part and on the part of others. And as verse 27 says, and whoever wants to be the first must be your slave. So the first will be last, and the last will be first. And it may mean, what that may mean is inviting people into our home who perhaps we don't know very well, or who are very different from us. That's a bit of a sacrifice, to take the time to be a servant to someone else. Inviting them for a meal, or just for something, a cup of tea, or whatever it might be. It may mean allowing others to take the lead, even if it slows us down. We go for cycle rides, and the rule is that in the church, when we go for a cycle ride, that we go by the speed of the slowest person. And sometimes for those of us who like to race ahead, that can be quite frustrating, but it's actually that's the way it should be sometimes, that we just have to step back a bit. It may mean giving up your precious time to be with others, as I've said. And I want to just show you a few pictures now from the nature walk the other evening. I'm going to ask two of my volunteers here. Do you want to come up? I'm going to ask them just to explain as we go on. I'm just going to get them to say a few words. I mean, I don't even know what they're going to say necessarily, but they're going to they had a great time. Did you have a good time on the walk? Well, what was really good about the walk? Let's just see. Is this mic working okay? Yeah.
That we done a race when we were outside doing the nature.
You did a race. Now we'll see a picture of the race in a moment, so I might get you to explain a bit more about it. Do you want to turn around a little bit, and what about you?
And we saw maple trees.
You saw maple trees. Wow, that's amazing. Now I'm going to just move on through the pictures. If you just have a look at some of the pictures on the screen, I'm going to ask you about some of them.
A tree of heaven.
A tree of heaven. These guys really know their stuff. It's amazing. Let's go on to the next pictures. And then we went on through the forest. Anything else? Let me see if there's any more close-ups of... What were you doing there?
Seeing little bugs.
What were you doing? Seeing bugs?
Little bugs.
Little bugs? Wow. So, did you want to say anything about that?
No.
No. Okay. Doesn't like bugs. Yeah. But also I noticed that you had a magnifying glass. So did you have a magnifying glass with you? Did you manage to see the bugs quite close up? Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we saw some really interesting flowers. Now that was just as we went through. I think Gehan said to us, we're going to have a brush with nature at this point, and that sounded a bit ominous. Do you remember going through the tunnel, through the trees? Do you remember anything about that? Anything you want to say about that? No? No, okay. And then that was a really beautiful kind of flower. I can't remember. Do you remember what that was called? I don't remember. But that was really beautiful. Some beautiful, this is all in the Russia Dock. You must go there. And then those, I don't know, does anybody remember what those were called? Teasels. Okay. Teacher's pet, yeah. Now, this is getting towards what, I think that might be, no, it's not you. I think that might be Lily at the end there trying to go up. But what did you do at the top of this hill? Tell us a bit about Stave Hill. What happened?
We had a race. We had a race and done rolling down the hill.
Wow. And did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Did you have a race as well?
Yeah.
Yeah? And did you enjoy it as well?
Yeah.
Yeah? I did it as well, actually, and I haven't got the film here, but I could have shown you a film of it. Maybe next week I'll show you a film. But yeah, we rolled down the hill, and I kept getting kicked in the head by Tobias. I don't know who won. Who won? Nobody. Yeah. Well, actually, what happened from the top of the hill was that everybody went that way. They all went that way around the hill. And then there's another picture of the hill. I think that's you actually, Ty, going up the hill, isn't it? Is that you? Yeah. And then that's on the top of the hill. Go there. It's a beautiful view right around the whole of London, 360 degrees. Amazing. That's going over towards Canary Wharf. Did you see anywhere else from the top of the hill?
No.
No, you didn't. Did you recognize anywhere at all? Did you think? Could you see where you lived? No. It's a lot to take in. And then that's you guys about to go down the hill. You were thinking about it, were you? Is that you? Yeah. And then, yes, that's both of you are there in those pictures. And you ran down the hill, didn't you? Didn't one of you run down? Or did you? Yeah, you did, yeah. And that's the view as the sun goes down over the hill. And then a lot of other people just walking down the hill. They weren't like us, they didn't roll down the hill, they just walked down the hill. And then there's a bit of climbing going on at the end, towards the end. Do you remember doing that? Yeah. That was good fun. And then anything about the pool here? We finished off at the pool. Do you remember anything about that? Do you want to say anything about that?
I saw flying ants.
Flying ants? Wow. And did you see anything else?
I saw ducks in the water, and I also saw houses.
Ducks in the water and houses, yeah. Lovely place to live. There's a view over this little pond from the houses that are nearby. And that's it. Thank you very much. Give them a round of applause. And I'm sure they'd be happy to share any, if you have any other questions, do ask them afterwards. And so, will we take time? Well, you've seen some slides. An opportunity when people as a family took time. And I think, that was just a great opportunity to spend time together. And will we take the time to be each other's servants? Sometimes being each other's servants is actually just about being with each other and listening to each other. And of course, Jesus said in Matthew 19, verse 14, he said, "Let the little children come to me and don't stop them." We've learnt a lot from 2 children this morning, from what their experience was of that walk, which of course also was an example of somebody else giving up their time to take us on that walk. And that brings me to the third question is, will we give as well as take? Jesus, of course, is our example. And as we hear at the end of that reading, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus gave his life for us. He gave everything for us. And he is our example. What will we give for others? Are we going to be consumers, or are we going to be contributors to the building of God's kingdom? Will we give our lives for others, for our family, for our fellow workers, for our friends? And will we follow through as Jesus did? And obviously, being part of a Christian community, a church family, there are opportunities, and I just want to remind you of a few opportunities, because we want everybody to be involved in small or big ways, and lots of ways. And each year we always look, you might remember from the annual meeting, there are various areas in which you can be involved to a smaller or greater extent, whether it be with children and young people in mission and outreach, welcome and hospitality, leading, preaching, worshipping. We all worship together, music, communication, pastoral, and prayer, praying for others, coming to pray with others. The more practical things, of course, is being part of a church, as well as the resources we have and the good management of those resources, including this building, which is a resource, even though it's also a drain on our resources at times. So, the final question is, will we give as well as take? Will we take time? Will we pursue true greatness in the example of Jesus Christ, who did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many?